The moment Penelope Mitchell walked into the Horizon Health Center for her first day as a private nurse, she knew this assignment would be different from any other she'd taken. The elegant mahogany-paneled reception area with its sophisticated artwork and hushed atmosphere was a stark contrast to the bustling hospitals where she'd spent the last 3 years of her nursing career. "Miss Mitchell," a woman in a crisp gray suit approached. "I'm Sandra, Mrs. Holloway's current caretaker. Thank you for coming. The family has been anxiously awaiting your arrival." Penelope adjusted the strap of her bag. "I'm looking forward to meeting Mrs. Holloway. Her file indicates she needs specialized post-stroke care." "Yes, Evelyn Holloway is recovering from a stroke she suffered 6 weeks ago. She's stable but requires constant monitoring." Sandra lowered her voice. "I should warn you, her grandson has very high standards. He's personally interviewed 12 nurses before you." 12. Penelope felt her confidence waver. He rejected them all. Mrs. Holloway is his only family and he's particular. As they walked down the hallway, Penelope mentally reviewed her qualifications. At 28, she had specialized in geriatric care and stroke rehabilitation. She was good at her job, exceptional, but she wondered what made this particular family so difficult to please. Sandra paused before a door. "Mrs. Holloway is resting. You'll meet her grandson later this afternoon when he comes for his daily visit." The room they entered was spacious and filled with natural light. An elderly woman with silver hair lay propped up against pillows, her right side noticeably weaker than her left. "Mrs. Holloway," Sandra said softly, "this is Penelope Mitchell, your new nurse." The woman's eyes fluttered open, intelligent and clear despite her physical condition. She studied Penelope with interest. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Holloway," Penelope said, approaching the bed. "I'll be helping with your recovery." When the elderly woman tried to speak, her words came out slurred and difficult to understand. Penelope leaned closer. "Take your time," she encouraged. "I'm not going anywhere." After a moment of concentration, Mrs. Holloway managed, "Call me Evelyn." Penelope smiled. "Evelyn it is." For the next few hours, Penelope familiarized herself with Evelyn's care routine, medical history, and therapy schedule. The woman had been a respected literature professor before retirement and clearly retained her sharp intellect despite the physical limitations imposed by her stroke. By mid-afternoon, Penelope had helped Evelyn with her exercises, administered medication, and was reading aloud from Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice when the door opened. The man who entered looked nothing like what Penelope had imagined. In her experience, demanding family members were usually older, entitled individuals with too much time on their hands. This man was young, perhaps early 30s tall, with dark hair and shoulders broad enough to make the doorframe seem suddenly insufficient. "Grandmother," he said, his voice deep and warm as he approached the bed, completely ignoring Penelope's presence. He bent to kiss Evelyn's forehead. "How are you feeling today?" Evelyn's face lit up. "Better, Gabriel." So this was the grandson who had rejected a dozen qualified nurses. Penelope straightened her spine as he finally turned to acknowledge her. "You must be the new nurse," he said, extending his hand. "Gabriel Holloway, Penelope Mitchell," she replied, noting his firm handshake and direct gaze. His eyes were a striking gray blue that reminded her of the ocean before a storm. "Miss Mitchell, might I have a word outside?" His tone made it clear this wasn't a request. In the hallway, Gabriel Holloway crossed his arms. "I understand you've been assigned to my grandmother's care." "What are your qualifications?" Penelope had prepared for this. "I have a BSN with additional certification in geriatric care and stroke rehabilitation. I've worked with stroke patients for 3 years and have excellent references which I assume you've already reviewed." "I have." He studied her with a penetrating gaze. "The agency speaks highly of you, but I need more than technical competence. My grandmother is stubborn. She refuses to follow therapy guidelines with most caregivers." "I noticed," Penelope replied. She tried to skip her hand exercises earlier, but we compromised. She'll do them if I read to her simultaneously. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. That's creative. Recovery requires consistency, but also adaptation. Mrs. Holloway Evelyn is a literature professor. Using her passion as motivation seemed logical. For the first time, Gabriel's stern expression softened slightly. You've done your homework. It's my job to understand my patients, Mr. Holloway, not just their medical conditions, but who they are as people. He nodded slowly. Fair enough. I expect daily reports on her progress. I visit every day, but you can reach me anytime if there are concerns. He handed her a business card with Holloway International embossed in gold lettering. Penelope glanced at the card. CEO. That explained the expensive suit and commanding presence. Of course, she replied, tucking the card away. Transparency is important in healthcare. Gabriel gave her one final appraising look. We'll see how this works out, Miss Mitchell. As he walked away, Penelope released the breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The intimidating CEO clearly adored his grandmother. That devotion, at least, was something she could respect. Over the next 2 weeks, Penelope fell into a routine with Evelyn. Mornings involved physical therapy, medication, and breakfast. Afternoons were dedicated to cognitive exercises, short walks when weather permitted, and reading sessions. Evelyn proved to be a delightful patient, strong-willed but warm, with a sharp wit that her stroke hadn't diminished. Gabriel visited every evening like clockwork, arriving at precisely 6:30 p.m. regardless of weather or, presumably, his work schedule. During those visits, Penelope would discreetly withdraw to give them privacy, using the time to prepare her daily reports or organize medications for the following day. One evening, after Gabriel had been with his grandmother for nearly an hour, Penelope was startled when he appeared in the small office adjacent to Evelyn's room. Miss Mitchell, a word. Penelope saved the notes she'd been typing and turned to face him. Is everything all right? My grandmother says you've been teaching her meditation techniques. She tensed. Yes, it's been shown to help stroke patients manage stress and improve focus during recovery. If you'd prefer I stop. No, he interrupted, surprising her. She says it's helping, I didn't authorize this approach. Penelope met his gaze directly. With all due respect, Mr. Holloway, I don't need authorization to implement evidence-based practices within my scope as a nurse. The silence that followed was tense. Gabriel's jaw tightened, and for a moment Penelope feared she'd overstepped. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled, a small, reluctant upturn of his lips that transformed his face. You're right, he conceded. And apparently effective. Her speech is noticeably clearer this week. She's working hard, Penelope said. Your grandmother is remarkably determined. A family trait, he replied, the hint of humor in his voice surprising her. My grandfather used to say loving a Holloway meant loving a force of nature. The personal comment caught Penelope off guard. It was the first time Gabriel had shared anything beyond strictly professional concerns. Well, that determination is serving her well in recovery. Gabriel nodded, then hesitated as if considering something. My grandmother has also mentioned that you've been staying late some evenings. Penelope felt her cheeks warm. Sometimes our reading sessions run long. Evelyn was telling me about her teaching days at the university, and I lost track of time. You don't bill for the extra hours. It's not work when you're enjoying the conversation. Gabriel studied her for a long moment. Most people see my grandmother as a patient, not a person. That's their loss, Penelope said honestly. She's fascinating. Something shifted in Gabriel's expression, a softening around the eyes, a subtle relaxation of his perpetually straight shoulders. Thank you, Miss Mitchell, he said quietly. Good night. As he left, Penelope found herself watching him longer than was professionally necessary, noting how his confident stride faltered slightly at the door to his grandmother's room, as if gathering strength before facing the reality of her condition again. The following Sunday, Penelope arrived to find Evelyn agitated. Gabriel hasn't called, the elderly woman explained, her speech clearer than it had been but still requiring concentration to form the words. He always calls Sunday mornings. I'm sure he's just busy, Penelope soothed, checking Evelyn's blood pressure, which was elevated. Let's try some deep breathing while I make you some tea. By noon, with still no word from Gabriel, even Penelope was concerned. It was dramatically out of character for the punctual CEO to miss a call without notice. After ensuring Evelyn was comfortable, Penelope stepped into the hallway and pulled out the business card he'd given her. After 3 rings, he answered with a hoarse, "Holloway." "Mr. Holloway, it's Penelope Mitchell. I'm calling because my grandmother," he interrupted, his voice raspy. "I forgot to call her. Are you all right? You sound unwell." There was a pause followed by what sounded like a painful cough. "It's nothing, a cold, I'll call her now." "A cold that makes you sound like you're breathing through gravel? Mr. Holloway, as a healthcare professional, I suggest—" "I don't need suggestions, Miss Mitchell," he snapped, then immediately sighed. "I apologize. That was uncalled for. Please tell my grandmother I'll call her in 10 minutes. Penelope frowned. "All right, but if you need medical attention, I'm fine," he insisted before ending the call. True to his word, Gabriel called Evelyn 10 minutes later. Penelope gave them privacy, but couldn't help noticing how Evelyn's brow furrowed with concern during the conversation. After the call, Evelyn looked at Penelope. "He's sick, alone in that big house." "I'm sure he'll be fine," Penelope reassured her. "He's a grown man." Evelyn fixed her with a knowing look. Gabriel works himself to exhaustion, never learned to slow down after his parents died. This was new information. "I didn't realize his parents had passed. Car accident when he was 22, Evelyn explained. "He took over the family business right after graduating, never had time to grieve properly." Penelope felt a pang of sympathy. It explained some of his intensity, the fierce protectiveness toward his grandmother. "He wouldn't want us worrying," she said gently. Evelyn reached for Penelope's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "He lives 30 minutes from here, 4827 Lakeside Drive. The security code is 1943, the year his grandfather was born. Mrs. Holloway, I can't just show up at your grandson's house." "You're a nurse," Evelyn insisted. "He needs one." Penelope hesitated. "It would be inappropriate. I'm your nurse, not his." "Today, be both," Evelyn said with the quiet authority that had likely silenced generations of unruly students. After arranging for Sandra to cover her shift and promising Evelyn she would check on Gabriel, Penelope found herself driving through one of the city's most exclusive neighborhoods. When she reached 4827 Lakeside Drive, she paused in her car, second-guessing her decision. The house before her was a modern architectural marvel of glass and stone overlooking a private lake. "This is wildly unprofessional," she muttered to herself as she approached the door with a bag containing basic medical supplies and homemade soup she'd quickly picked up from her apartment. After ringing the bell and receiving no answer, she reluctantly entered the security code. The door unlocked with a soft click. "Mr. Holloway," she called out, stepping into a minimalist foyer of polished concrete and recessed lighting. "It's Penelope Mitchell. Your grandmother sent me to check on you." A groan from upstairs led her to a master bedroom where Gabriel Holloway, CEO of a multinational corporation, lay tangled in sheets, his face flushed with fever. "Miss Mitchell," he croaked, struggling to sit up. "What are you doing in my house?" "Evelyn was worried," Penelope said, approaching cautiously. "May I?" She gestured toward his forehead. He frowned but nodded, wincing when her cool hand touched his burning skin. "You're running a significant fever," she said professionally. "How long have you been feeling ill?" "It started Friday," he admitted. "Just thought it was exhaustion." Penelope opened her medical bag. "Have you taken anything? Eaten? Aspirin, no appetite." After a thorough assessment, Penelope determined he had a severe case of influenza. "You need fluids, medication, and rest. Lots of rest." "I have meetings tomorrow," he protested weakly. You have a fever of 102.5, she countered. The only meeting you're attending is with your pillow. A ghost of a smile crossed his pale face. You're very direct, Miss Mitchell. Penelope, she corrected. If I'm playing nurse in your bedroom, we can drop the formalities. His eyes widened slightly, and Penelope immediately blushed at the unintended implication. I brought soup, she stammered, grateful for the excuse to turn away and unpack her bag. For the next few hours, Penelope coaxed Gabriel to eat small amounts of soup, take medication, and drink water. As the fever reducer began to work, he became more lucid. You didn't have to do this, he said, watching her organize his nightstand with medications, water, and tissues. Your grandmother was worried. And you always do what my grandmother asks, Penelope smiled. She's very persuasive. A family trait, he echoed their earlier conversation, then added more softly, Thank you, Penelope. The way he said her name deliberately, as if testing how it felt on his tongue, sent an unexpected warmth through her that had nothing to do with the sick room's temperature. You should rest, she said, gathering the soup bowl. I'll check on you again before I leave. You're leaving. The question held a note of vulnerability that seemed out of character. I need to report back to your grandmother, Penelope explained, but I can come back tomorrow if you'd like. Gabriel looked as if he wanted to refuse, pride warring with practicality. Finally, practicality won. If it's not too much trouble. It's no trouble, she assured him, surprised to find she meant it. When Penelope returned to Evelyn with a full report, the elderly woman listened with a knowing smile. You like him, she declared once Penelope had finished. I what? No, that's not. I was just doing my job. Your job is here with me, Evelyn pointed out. Going to his home was kindness, not obligation. Penelope busied herself checking Evelyn's medication. He's my patient's grandson. It's important to maintain appropriate boundaries. Boundaries? Evelyn scoffed. At my age, you realize how foolish boundaries can be when it comes to matters of the heart. There are no matters of the heart here, Mrs. Holloway, Penelope insisted, though she couldn't quite meet the older woman's eyes. If you say so, dear. Over the next 3 days, Penelope maintained her regular shifts with Evelyn but spent her evenings checking on Gabriel. His condition improved steadily, and by the 3rd day, he was well enough to work remotely from his home office. Penelope found their interactions shifting from purely medical to something more personal. You never mentioned what made you choose nursing, Gabriel said as they shared tea in his kitchen on her final evening visit, his health now nearly restored. Penelope considered the question. My grandfather had Alzheimer's when I was a teenager. His nurses made such a difference, not just medically but emotionally. I wanted to do that for others. Gabriel nodded thoughtfully. You've certainly done that for my grandmother. She's different since you started caring for her. More. Herself. She's an extraordinary woman, Penelope said. You're lucky to have each other, I know. Gabriel's expression grew distant. After my parents died, she was my rock. Insisted I finish college instead of immediately taking over the family business. Said my father would have wanted that. She mentioned the accident, Penelope said gently. I'm sorry for your loss. Gabriel rarely spoke about his parents, but something about Penelope's quiet presence made it easier. It was a long time ago. Building Holloway International into what it is today has been my way of honoring them. And it's impressive what you've accomplished, Penelope acknowledged. Though your grandmother worries you work too hard, he smiled ruefully. Another family trait. As she prepared to leave, Gabriel walked her to the door. Thank you, Penelope. Not just for the medical care, but for the company. It was no hardship, she replied honestly. You're surprisingly good company when you're not being an intimidating CEO. His laugh was unexpected and genuine. I'm not sure if I've been insulted or complimented. Both, she said with a smile. Good night, Gabriel. She was halfway to her car when his voice stopped her. Penelope. He stood in the doorway, illuminated by the warm light from within. Would you like to have dinner with me sometime, not as my grandmother's nurse or as a medical professional, but just as yourself? The question caught her completely off guard. "I don't think that would be appropriate while I'm caring for your grandmother." Disappointment flickered across his face, but he nodded. "I understand, professional boundaries." "Yes," she said, though the word felt hollow even to her own ears. When Penelope returned to work the following day, Evelyn immediately sensed something had changed. "He asked you out, didn't he?" Penelope nearly dropped the blood pressure cuff. "How could you possibly know that?" Evelyn chuckled. "Because I know my grandson. And I've seen how he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching." "I declined," Penelope said firmly. "It wouldn't be professional." "Nonsense," Evelyn declared. "Love doesn't care about professional boundaries." "Love, Mrs. Holloway, I think you're getting ahead of yourself." The elderly woman patted Penelope's hand. "Maybe, but at my age, you learn not to waste time denying what's right in front of you." The conversation left Penelope unsettled, especially when Gabriel arrived for his usual evening visit. There was a new tension between them, a heightened awareness that made even passing a cup of water feel significant. For the next 2 weeks, their interactions remained cordial but carefully distanced. Gabriel continued his daily visits, but spoke mainly to his grandmother, while Penelope found reasons to be busy with charts or preparations. The easy rapport they developed during his illness had been replaced by polite professionalism that felt increasingly forced. One afternoon, Dr. Reynolds, Evelyn's neurologist, arrived for a scheduled evaluation. After a thorough examination, he delivered the news they'd all been hoping for. "Mrs. Holloway, your recovery has exceeded our expectations," he announced. "I believe you're ready for outpatient therapy 3 times weekly rather than full-time nursing care." Evelyn beamed with pride. "Does that mean I can go home? With some modifications to your house and continued therapy, yes," the doctor confirmed. "You'll need regular checkups, but there's no reason you can't return to independent living with periodic assistance." When Gabriel arrived that evening, Penelope watched his face transform with joy at the news. He embraced his grandmother gently, his usual reserve completely abandoned. "This is wonderful," he said. "I'll have the house prepared immediately." As the initial excitement settled, reality dawned on Penelope. This meant her assignment was coming to an end. In 1 week, Evelyn would return to her own home with only part-time assistance needed. Penelope was genuinely happy for Evelyn's recovery. It was, after all, the goal of her care, but she couldn't ignore the hollow feeling that accompanied the realization that she would no longer see Gabriel daily. Or at all. The night before Evelyn's discharge, Penelope stayed late to help finalize preparations. Gabriel had arranged for specialized equipment to be installed at Evelyn's home and had hired a part-time aide to assist with therapy exercises. "It seems you've thought of everything," Penelope remarked as they reviewed the transition plan in the small office. "I learned from watching you," Gabriel replied. "Your attention to detail in my grandmother's care has been enlightening." Penelope smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just doing my job. Was it just a job when you came to my house when I was sick?" he asked quietly. The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken possibilities. "No," she admitted finally. "It wasn't just a job then." Gabriel took a step closer. "And is it just a job now?" Penelope looked up at him, abandoning pretense. "You know it's not." "After tomorrow, you won't be my grandmother's nurse anymore," he said, his voice low. "What about those professional boundaries then?" Her heart raced. "They would no longer apply." The tension between them had built to an unbearable point when Evelyn's call from the other room interrupted the moment. "We should." Penelope gestured toward the door. "Yes," Gabriel agreed, though neither moved immediately. "But this conversation isn't over." The following day was a whirlwind of activity. Evelyn was discharged with ceremony, the staff at Horizon Health Center celebrating her remarkable recovery. Gabriel had arranged for a comfortable car to transport her home, where a small welcome party of her closest friends awaited. Penelope completed her final paperwork and packed her things, a sense of accomplishment mingled with sadness. As she prepared to leave, Evelyn insisted on a private moment. "My dear," the elderly woman said, taking Penelope's hands in hers. "You've given me back my independence, and for that I'll always be grateful." "You did all the hard work," Penelope assured her. "I just provided guidance." "You provided much more than that," Evelyn said meaningfully. "To both of us," Penelope blushed. "Mrs. Holloway, Evelyn," she corrected. "And before you give me that speech about professional boundaries again, let me remind you that as of 1 hour ago, I am no longer your patient." "That's true," Penelope conceded. "So when my grandson asks you to dinner again, and he will remember that there's nothing inappropriate about two people exploring what's clearly already between them." Penelope smiled. "You're very persistent." "A family trait," Evelyn winked. "One you might as well get used to." After saying her goodbyes, Penelope walked toward her car in the parking lot. She was surprised to find Gabriel waiting beside it. "I thought you'd be at the party," she said. "I wanted to catch you before you left," he explained. "To thank you properly for everything you've done for my grandmother." "It was my pleasure, truly." Gabriel took a deep breath. "Penelope, now that our professional relationship has concluded, I'd like to revisit my dinner invitation." She couldn't help smiling. "Your grandmother said you would." "Did she now?" He raised an eyebrow. "And what did she advise?" "To say yes." Gabriel stepped closer. "And what do you want to say?" The weeks of maintained distance, of denying what had been growing between them, dissolved in that moment. "Yes," Penelope answered. "I'd like that very much." His smile was transformative, lighting his entire face in a way she'd rarely seen. "Tomorrow, 7 o'clock, tomorrow," she agreed. What began as a dinner date extended into a weekend of conversations, shared meals, and walks along the lakefront. Without the constraints of their previous roles, Penelope and Gabriel discovered how naturally they fit together. His intensity was balanced by her compassion. Her practical nature complemented his visionary thinking. Over the following months, their relationship deepened. Gabriel introduced Penelope to the world of Holloway International, a diversified corporation with interests in sustainable energy, medical technology, and real estate development. Penelope continued her nursing career, eventually accepting a position as Director of Patient Care at a rehabilitation center funded by the Holloway Foundation. Evelyn, of course, watched their blossoming relationship with smug satisfaction. 6 months after Penelope's assignment ended, Gabriel took her to dinner at an elegant restaurant overlooking the city. As dessert arrived, he reached across the table for her hand. "Do you remember the first day we met?" he asked. Penelope laughed. "You mean when you interrogated me about my qualifications and looked at me like I might be a threat to your grandmother's recovery?" "I was protective," he defended with a smile. "But you saw through that immediately. You never backed down, never compromised your professional judgment even when I questioned it." "Someone had to stand up to the intimidating CEO," she teased. Gabriel's expression grew serious. "That day changed my life in ways I couldn't have imagined. My grandmother's stroke was one of the most frightening experiences of my life, but it led me to you." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Penelope's breath caught as he opened it to reveal a stunning emerald-cut diamond ring. "Penelope Mitchell, you came into my life to care for the person I love most in this world, and somehow along the way, you became that person. You've taught me that true strength isn't about control or perfection, it's about vulnerability and connection." He moved from his chair to one knee beside her. "I love you. Will you marry me?" Tears filled Penelope's eyes as she nodded. "Yes, of course, yes." As Gabriel slipped the ring onto her finger, applause erupted around them. Penelope looked up to see Evelyn approaching their table, assisted by her cane but walking steadily. "Grandmother," Gabriel stood in surprise. "What are you doing here? Did you really think I'd miss this moment?" Evelyn embraced them both. "I've been waiting in the bar for the past hour." Penelope laughed through her tears. "You knew about this?" "My dear, I've known this was coming since the day you showed up at his house with soup," Evelyn said confidently. Some things an old woman just knows. As they celebrated into the evening, Penelope reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought them to this point. What had begun as a professional assignment had transformed into the love story she'd never expected, but had always deserved. 6 months later, Penelope and Gabriel were married in a ceremony overlooking the lake behind his home, with Evelyn proudly serving as Penelope's matron of honor. The woman who had once been her patient had become family in every sense of the word. In her vows, Penelope spoke the truth that had changed her life. "I came to care for your grandmother, never imagining I'd find my heart's home. Thank you for trusting me with her care, and now for trusting me with your heart." Gabriel's response brought tears to everyone's eyes. "Some say business is about calculated risks, but loving you has been the easiest decision of my life. What started as gratitude has grown into the deepest love I've ever known." As they sealed their vows with a kiss, Evelyn watched with undisguised satisfaction. After all, it had been her stroke that brought them together, a fact she would remind them of with great pleasure for years to come.